And likewise, these UFOs here on the screen that were taped over Germany with basic night vision technology remind me of all those objects that were seen over the Nuremberg, Germany area that were recorded in those printed papers of the 1500s. The only difference is they weren't using night vision goggles, which to me is evidence of those Illuminati Nephilim bloodlines that they could see these things. Their reality was not the same as our reality. So there's that. But this technology that I want to show you in these night vision goggles that the military was experimenting with over half a century ago was a completely different technology. It was actually a combination technology. It had 2 or 3 different types of technology all woven together to get the effect that these soldiers witnessed. And I believe this is the technology that holds the key to both what the people in the Gothic region were seeing in their reality that was just part of their biological makeup, and also holds the key to what these realm walkers are experiencing, because they are experiencing dark realms. When they are tuned into that state, it's, how people report the astral, that they see the city of night and they see this entire other reality. And when you listen to them explain it, they explain that it is a layer of this reality. So it's a shift. It's literally a paradigm shift, a dark shift that is biological, where I believe they are seeing the same thing that the descendants of the Nephilim see. Many people have said in the UFO community for years and years, going back to the 1970s, around the time that these goggles were beta tested in Vietnam, several whistleblowers from those underground bases after the Roswell crash have come out and said that we got technologies like fiber optics and night vision goggles from these, quote, aliens, which we know are the Nephilim. They're the demon spawn. This is the frequency they see in. This is the frequency they live in. It's the frequency of Tartarus, the Tartarian Empire. See what I'm saying? That's why we see gargoyles and monsters and demons all over their architecture, because that's the world they lived in. Even though, for a brief season, like the records of the Hyperboreans, a dark age, if you will, they overlapped with us in this density. And we could perceive them, and they could perceive us, just like we can perceive bats, and they can perceive us, but we'll never see the world the same way. Just watch this clip about the night vision goggles and tell me, does this not sound exactly like all of these gargoyles and entities that we see depicted on the Gothic cathedrals and in the Gothic art?
So my father did 3 tours in the Vietnam War. And in his second tour, he was advanced enough in rank, and he was there, I think, 11 or 12 months. And when he was in country at that point, he was he's always been a field officer and came up in the military through the Korean War in a battlefield commission. And so, the military likes guys like him, and they let him be in charge of a couple of different projects. One of the projects that he was in charge of at the time was this technology that they introduced into Vietnam that almost brought the war to a standstill. Wow. And this technology was a night vision goggle, but it's not night vision as we have it now, okay? Because the night vision goggle was done in the red spectrum. And so when my father came back from Vietnam...
You mean infrared or...
No, I'll explain.
Ordinary red.
Oh, ordinary red, okay. So instead of seeing... When you look at a night vision goggles now, you see green. Everything is translated into green for you. And human eye sees green, more colors, shades of green than any other color. Food.
So that's clever then.
Correct. But see, here's the thing. It started off as red. And so the night vision goggles were introduced to helicopter pilots and gunnery people in Vietnam. And I won't hesitate as to I won't guess as to which year it was that they introduced them, but my father was part of this initial experiment with the troops that he commanded. And it was a disaster because the image was presented in red pixels, not green. And because of the technology being used at that time, it created very interesting effects that they could not deal with. So you had some officers that were part of this cadre or this cohort of other officers that were all testing these new technologies for the military, that had their troops always use these goggles. And those units became self-destructive. They went down in a horrid situation. My father was extremely practical, didn't want to see himself get destroyed in any way, wanted to return and get out. So as soon as he saw what was going on with these goggles, he had his people take them off. And he actually got praise from the military for the way that he dealt with all of this. But the effect was this: a gunner in a helicopter would have no problem using these goggles, and only everything is showing up as a sort of a faint reddish image. And it was true night vision the way we have it now, and even a greater depth, because you could also flip it and get an extra layer that was sort of yellowish that would be heat signatures as well. And they don't have those combined anymore in these goggles. Anyway, the goggles that were presented to the gunners, and my father tells the story of the very first time they're out with them, and they're flying along, and he's in the front of the helicopter with the pilot. And all of a sudden, in a very peaceful area, not anything going on at all, the gunner in his on the starboard side of his helicopter starts firing wildly at their height, not at anything on the ground, but in an area that he was shooting at, and basically causing other helicopters in their little flotilla to have to react. And my father goes on back to the gunner, basically demanding, "What the hell, dude? What are you shooting at?" And the kid is just sweating profusely, and his eyes are just dilated beyond belief. And my dad thought he was dealing with another heroin addict, but this was before it had gotten really bad in Vietnam, and the kid was not exhibiting those kind of symptoms. He was reacting to what he had seen. And he's describing to my father that he was shooting at these basically flying demons that were flying alongside the helicopter. And he knew they were coming to get him because they were gesturing at him and they could see him. And so he reacted, and he started shooting his Bren gun, big 50 caliber slugs at these things, right? And they were flying along right next to the helicopter, so he's firing out directly from the helicopter, and there are other helicopters in the vicinity, so it caused all kinds of problems. And this goes on repeatedly, week after week after week. Every time they try and use these night vision goggles, at some point they encounter monsters, true monsters. Now, officers had been told not to wear these. Okay, the pilots were told not to wear them. But my dad put them on to see what the hell was going on, and to hear him describe it, it was like being in the worst kind of a demonic gothic hell. Jeez. That you'd look out at the tops of trees and you'd see these creatures with big wings and claws and everything come flying off of the tops of the trees. But you take the goggles off and there's not even a disturbance in the fog above the canopy of the trees, right?
They're perceiving into an aspect of consciousness.
Correct.
Another dimension.
And it was tied to the red image. As soon as they went to green, all of this kind of stuff disappeared.
Of course. And we don't have time.
Yeah, I know.
Me studying Pythagoreanism and vibrations, we could speak a lot about this, but let's not even go there. But one question: are these connected to the modern night vision goggles people used to see UFOs?
Correct.
Third generation or whatever they're called. Is this the same technology?
It's the same technology. It's just that the translation is done through a different phase alignment, and we're not seeing everything that the goggles could show you. And
they don't connect it to heat signatures either, right? Organic.
They don't do that, and then they also don't do it with a red display. Now, the red aspect of it is interesting because the green display comes from electrons, not photons, okay? And it comes from an electron transmission.
That keeps it more material.
Exactly. And at this stage, though, in Vietnam, when they introduced them, it was brief. The whole project lasted about 60 days, and then it was all canceled. And the people
of course, it was so impractical.
Correct. I mean, your flotilla is shooting at each other, right?
Suddenly they had a new enemy.
Now, also, listening to how that gunner reacted when he was shooting at something that wasn't there, that was flying around him, doesn't that also sound like what these vaccine spinners are seeing? That, nobody else can see it, but they've obviously been augmented. I mean, in my opinion, look at them. Look at this. So just think about this augmented humanity, that they can't take the night vision goggles off. They can't take the VR off because it's been augmented in their body. Okay, now this next clip about this different kind of goggles and technology is interesting, because if there are synthetics among us, bodies that were genetically engineered, like in the Linda Moulton Howe alien abductee, bodies that are specifically created to house this AI nanoswarm, this artificial spirit, and they are not real, they're synthetics. Or I guess the old school term is organic robotoids. But this concept is different because it reportedly could tell the difference between who's a synthetic and who is real.
You won't believe what's behind the story of these weird-looking blue goggles. And this is a subject which has the least amount of search results on Google that I've ever seen for any other theory or conspiracy. So in the early 1900s, a guy named Walter Kilner, who you can't even find a picture of him on Google, developed a sort of dye from coal tar. So he took this collodion-coated dye-treated glass plates and put Dicenian dye, that's the thing from the coal tar, in the middle of this glass. And the story goes that with these glasses, you can see outside of the normal range of visible light. All of a sudden your eyeballs can detect different wavelengths and frequencies of light. And it's said to have enabled the user to see people's auras. And you could see how strong or how weak someone's aura is, which is the electromagnetic field that we all emanate, at least normal humans do. But where this gets a little crazy, it's said that Walter Kilner, when he wore these glasses in public, not everyone had an aura. Not just a weak aura, but no aura at all. You remember the movie They Live? When he puts on glasses and he can see the aliens in the crowd that normally without the glasses just look like normal humans? Some say this movie was actually based on the events of Dicenian glass. And then, of course, Walter's place gets raided and all of his equipment confiscated, and this gets totally buried and no one knows anything about it to this day, except for a couple stories floating around the internet. So I'm going to try to get some Dicenium and make my own Dicenium glasses, and I'll see if you're real.
Now, although I think that technology is absolutely real and hidden, I don't think you're going to get the original recipe by getting aura glasses on eBay or anything like that. I think it's similar to the night vision goggles that you can get now. You can get night vision goggles and they are amazing and even can pick up UFOs. That's for real. But they're still nowhere close to those multi-layered mixed technology night vision goggles that were beta tested during Vietnam that could flat out see another dimension. From what I understand about the originals, which all of his records were confiscated during the raid, but from what I understand, they incorporated some of the technology that we now see in Kirlian photography. And the evidence that this isn't the same, that it's just not electrons and light refracting and stuff, the evidence that this technology really is seeing another aspect of self, another dimension of all living things, is the mystery or anomaly of the phantom leaf, which is that you can cut part of a leaf off or cut a leaf in half and then use the Kirlian photography to take a picture of it, and its spirit will still be there. So the quote aura photographed by Kirlian photography will show the entire leaf, even if you destroy its body in this density. So that's similar to a living human, that we have a soul and spirit from God. We are three-dimensional, body, soul, and spirit. So even though we have a body here, you can kill the body, but we're still alive, because this isn't all of us, This is just one density of us, one dimension of us. So that is the difference. The organic robotoids are just a body. They're literally just an avatar. They're a body. They're an organic robotoid. They do not have that aspect of self that is life itself. Jesus Christ says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. I am the Holy Spirit. He is the life. They just don't have that. So from what I understand, his original technology did work and could differentiate who was actually human, who was an actual descendant of Adam. Israel, who is real. And in fact, I believe that's exactly why the men in black in those early days, the men in black always wore those dark glasses. And likewise until recently, all of the Secret Service, they all had these dark sunglasses. I mean, now it has split off and it's so compartmentalized that only the deep state, the cult, knows about that technology. You're not going to find any FBI guys or Secret Service guys like protecting regular politicians these days wearing that technology. But from what I understand, that's where the whole dark sunglasses thing originated from. It was the men in black wearing this technology. I've also heard multiple prophetic dreams and visions over the years from people who they don't understand why, and they all say that when they tell their testimony. They're like, I don't know how they did it, but they said that in the tribulation, during the Great Tribulation, they were shown that the Christians could not hide from the beast system, from the Antichrist and these hive mind transhumans, that they could tell just by looking at you if you were one of them. So there were like multiple testimonies of, say, people being in a shopping center or a flea market type setting because it was like after an economic collapse or something. And in the crowd, the people who took the mark of the beast would look at them and ostracize them. So it wasn't just even about being able to use digital currency that they weren't allowed to buy and sell, but the people in these cities who were all hive mind, they would not buy or sell or help anybody who glowed, anybody who had life, anybody who was a Christian. And I remember another one where they said they were in the concentration camps. They were being separated out, all the prisoners of war after the invasion. They just rounded everybody up. But then when they got to the camps, they separated out the Christians specifically by looking for the ones who glowed. So I thought all of that was interesting. You can take it or leave it, but it's interesting, right? Similarly, a lot of people report phantom limb syndrome. Amputees, people who have had a limb amputated, they report that they can still feel it. And we were just talking about that in the Stranger Things video about aspects of self or dimensions of self. And even if one body is destroyed on one level, that doesn't kill all the dimensions of yourself. Which also sort of in a roundabout way plays into these realm walkers and what they are reporting and what everybody reports. This actually happened to my own son. And it's happened to me before, and it's happened to tons of people. But like when I have encountered some of these entities in dream state, then I will wake up with physical evidence of that in this dimension. So there is some overlap. For example, my heart surgery. I told you guys years ago about what really happened in the dream state. These like 6 demons came down my hallway, and it was right after my brother had died of heart failure, and I had seen them. I had seen them in the astral going into the hospital. Not just them, but thousands of these. They were like pewter colored looking metallic, and they were like hybrids. They were like centaurs and satyrs and stuff like that, like half animal, half human. And they were all going into the hospital. And I had the understanding that they were the things that were making everybody sick who were in the hospital. Like they were going to work. But while I was watching all of these thousands of demons in the hospital parking lot going in the astral, one of them turned around and looked at me. He saw me see him. He knew I could see him. Similar to that military guy, that gunner in the Vietnam War who said that gargoyle or dragon or whatever looked at him and recognized that he could see them, and then they turned and came after him. Well, that happened to me. So after I saw that, and then after my brother died and everything, I don't know, it was probably within a week. It was the first week. It was probably like 3 days. These things who saw me see them at the hospital parking lot came down my hallway 2 by 2 in rows. There was either 6 or 8 of them. And they were, the one in front was the leader, and it was a satyr. It was a short-haired goat person. And she was a woman, but she was very androgynous. And her horns, it wasn't like you'd think goat man, like big old horns, were like little nubby ones, like you would see in the ancient art. Anyway, so they come down my hallway and started threatening me and said, "You're next," and stuck their finger in my chest. And I immediately woke up from that, quote, dream, And yeah, my heart was going crazy all over the place. I had to go to the emergency room, and that's when I ended up having the heart surgery. Another time I woke up and had bruises on my arm that were obvious handprints. You could see the fingers, and it was a deep bruise, not just like a red mark that went away. No, it was like someone had drugged me by my arm with all my body weight hanging off my arm. Like it was that bad of a bruise, and it was exactly a handprint. And it was right after that I had this picture on the screen with the black shadow person in my bed. That's my arm right there. And my son actually took these pictures. So I was going through this thing but couldn't see anything. But my little toddler son liked to play with my phone. And so, he was always going through the house, taking pictures of his cartoons and his stuffed animals and stuff. So he came in, he was standing around my bed, walking around, taking pictures while I was going through this, because I was in bed for like 2 weeks. I could not get up. Chronic fatigue was an understatement. And the pain, just like fibromyalgia is what they called it, but it felt like biting and pinching and stabbing and stinging, unbearable. And of course, I knew I was under spiritual attack because I was the one who had just had the astral experiences with these things, who came in and told me it was my turn, that they were going to freaking kill me. And then I could see all these things for days. I could see these lights and orbs flying around my room. I saw shadow people. And when I would pray, I prayed incessantly, and I would see like a white force field come up on both sides of me, like two, almost like guardian angels. And it was lightning white, like a white I haven't seen on this earth, like lightning white. And it would come up on both sides of me and just kind of step forward a few feet forward in front of me. And then I would get relief. But this went on for at least 2 weeks. I could not get out of bed. But this particular day that my son took all of these pictures in my bedroom, I wasn't seeing anything. I was just laying there being tormented. I could feel it, but I didn't see any of this stuff with the naked eye. It wasn't until I was going through the pictures on my camera later and saw that all those pictures he took that day had all of this stuff in them. Multiple entities, multiple orbs. I got dogpiled. I am not even kidding. And of course, my ex, he wasn't saved or anything. I don't know, some of these demons might have been attached to him. He had like the sleep paralysis and things like that. But these things that got on me that night, they dogpiled me. I felt like I was being torn apart. And there was nobody to pray for me or help me because, obviously my ex, you see his situation, he thinks his name's freaking Natasha now. He couldn't help me. And my son at that time was only, maybe 3 years old or 4 years old. So I was basically alone in the house fighting this spiritual battle with these things that had me pinned down in my bed. And everybody thought I was crazy. My ex thought I was crazy because I was literally praying around the clock by myself to get out from under this thing. I had Brother Carlos on YouTube on a loop. I would pray for 4 hours straight, casting these things off. And I desperately needed help. But, my ex, he would not help me. In fact, he worked with the demons against me, gaslighting me. So it was a real godsend that my son took all of those pictures in my room so that some of the other people in my family believed me after they saw the pictures. I'll just play the first minute or two of this video because I put a few of the clips in there. They're not remarkable, but this was really happening to me. It was remarkable to me. I was living through it. But see these streaks? People who say that these are dust. At shutter speed, the shutter speed from a camera, you're telling me that these things zipping around this fast, that's dust? Dude, it wasn't a tornado in my room. It felt like one, but these things were flying around everywhere. But some of the pictures I don't have in this video. It's mostly just orbs and shadow people and stuff in the pictures I put in that video. But there were pictures, and I still have the camera around here somewhere. There were pictures of these imp-like creatures on my legs. And oh, how my legs ached. Oh, they ached so bad. You know how when you have like shin splints, that sort of pain? It was like that sort of pain. only in multiple spots up and down my legs. You know what? I'm going to go back and try to find those pictures on that camera and show you those, because those were really creepy. They remind me of that one picture that I chose for the thumbnail of the Black Awakening. You know what? Let me go back and see if I can find. Let me zoom back here. Okay, in this picture, I turned the brightness all the way up so you could see it. But see, this is my face. So my head would go like straight down like that. And my chin's like over here kind of out of the side of the picture. That's just the very side of my face. But see this big ball, this big fleshy looking thing here? That's obviously not my face. I don't have a, that would have to be the size of a softball or a little bigger, about the size of a softball. That thing on the side of my face was the things that were all up and down my legs. You could see them. They were about maybe 8 inches tall. They looked like imps. They looked like little imps, little gargoyle-looking humanoid. You know what? I told you they looked like that picture. Let me find that picture. Here, like this thing. They looked like this thing, and about that size. Maybe 8 inches. I don't know, about 8 inches tall. Some of them look like maybe 12 inches. Some a little smaller, like 6. They didn't have floppy ears, though. But pretty much the rest of this kind of humanoid looking, but also gargoyle-y looking. And they were biting into me. I mean, it was like having a bunch of baby vampires on me. It was like, they were stuck on me like barnacles on a whale. I'm not kidding. I'm going to find those pictures and show you guys. But they were flesh colored. They weren't like black, like the shadow people things that I saw in the room. They weren't black. They were fleshy, peachy color. Here, I looked and looked and looked. And this was the closest picture I could find to them. So that when I say gargoyle, I don't mean wings. These didn't have wings or anything. They were like little imps. They looked about like this, except just a little more peachy flesh tone colored. And they were like little vampires or something. They were just stuck on my legs, and I had that aching feeling all up and down my legs like, like a shin splint, only all up and down my legs. They call it fibromyalgia, but I could see it in the pictures. I could see what it was. I didn't know what it was until I saw the pictures, and I could see them on there. And I think that's also what caused the chronic fatigue syndrome. I was absolutely being drained. And you know what? It reminds me of an episode the Paranormal Roundtable did, talking about these 2 boys that encountered something in this house they lived in. And it was feeding off of them, and it did the same thing on their legs. Not on their neck, like you would think a Hollywood movie. It was coming in at night and feeding off of their legs.
It's a scary time we're living in. And now there's a story that goes back a long ways. And in Hong Kong, for whatever reason, it's really a very common theme. And it is called the Jiangshi. Now, the Jiangshi is called the hopping ghost or the vampire ghost. Anyway, he's like, so our house was on top of another house. And he's like, and so the people that lived down below us, they were always arguing and fighting. And there was all kinds of weird stuff going on. There were all kinds of weird people coming and going. And then one day they find the guy dead, the guy that lived below them. And the wife was arrested for his murder. She swore to her innocence, and she was eventually put on trial, but then she was released because there was no evidence to say that she had killed this guy. He said that he doesn't know if this is what caused the haunting or whatever, but shortly after his death, and he said it didn't happen immediately. It was like a couple weeks. Weird stuff started happening. He said that one day his mother was drinking tea, and the glass just shattered, and it was like a little ceramic teacup, whatever.
Yeah.
Another time there was like a saucer cup or a cup on a saucer, and the saucer just began to shake and vibrate, and then it spun out from underneath the teacup, and that fell over. His dad was not a superstitious man, and he was a hardworking guy, and he worked all the time, and he said, we're not going to entertain the idea that there's some ghost, right? Well, then a couple days later, he hears his mother screaming in the bedroom, and his dad was working until late that night. And he said he runs into the bedroom with his younger brother, and they see this the only way he could describe it was like this black mass, like rolling around on the bed, trying to grab his mother. And they were like these sort of like arms, as he called them, but they were more like tentacles with little phalanges on the end trying to grab her. And she was like trying to get loose. And it was like weird. He goes, it was like some invisible force was keeping her on the bed. And so finally it got loose and they screamed and yelled and whatever. And they started saying all these prayers. And eventually it let go and this thing kind of sunk into the bed. So then she went to her husband and said, look, there's something going on. I don't want to deal with this. We need to get the hell out of this house. And, you know, she was very like superstitious where he was not. It was like polar opposites. And he said, well, this is happening to you because you believe in it. He's like, and then the next thing that happened, like he was in the kitchen with his mother and like all the cabinets began opening and closing at one time. And he said it didn't go like on and on, but it was just like real quick. They were sitting there and then it was just bang, 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 bang. And then it stopped. And then he said that, you know, he goes at that point, he goes, me and my brother were just living in terror of whatever the hell was going to come next. And he said that eventually it led to his brother complaining. His brother's a couple years younger than him, that something was coming into the room at night when he was trying to sleep and it was biting him. And he showed his brother and he said that there were bite marks on his chest, on the back of his shoulder, on his foot, and on his leg. And he said that eventually, he said, I woke up and I had like what looked like a bite mark, the human-like bite mark, but with like pronounced puncture wounds of like canine teeth or whatever on my arm. And he said, so I decided, you know, one night I was going to stay up, you know, because I was just sick and tired of having these weird dreams. I kept having these dreams of this weird, like ghoulish looking thing coming into the room. And he goes, and I thought it was just a dream. It was just dreams, right? And he said, eventually I stayed up and I waited and I watched. And he goes, and one of the ways that you can catch the hopping ghosts is they put a bowl of water down in front of the door. He goes, well, I learned that if this was the hopping ghost, most of the stories were actually bullcrap. He's like, this thing came into the room, floated into the room. It didn't even, the water was not even an obstacle at all. It just went around it. He's like, but I observed it. He goes, and I watched it. He goes, and for night after night after night, I was staying up. And he goes, and I wasn't in school at that time. We were off from school. And so I was like sitting there watching this thing. And he goes, I was staring at it, you know, with my head just above the covers. He goes, and I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream. He goes, and it floated over to my brother. And immediately, like, it bent down like this weird angle. It did not bend its knees. He said it just bent itself at the waist and began to, like, bite his feet. He goes, and my brother just started to kind of kick and twitch, but didn't really, like, he didn't wake up and protest and scream and yell or whatever. It was like he wasn't even aware that he was being attacked. Now, if you know anything about the vampire bat, it actually does that. Like, it actually will sit there and bite a cow or a horse.
Its saliva has like a numbing tendency.
It stops, it numbs it, and then it has this agent that stops your blood from coagulating. So it just keeps flowing, and it drinks its fill, and it flies away, and the animal doesn't even know that it's been bit. So it's really crazy. So he says this thing maybe was the same way. He goes, I don't know. He's like, but I observed it, like, biting my brother's feet. And I was just like, I was in shock and in terror, and I wanted to scream. He goes, and finally, he goes, my brother began to, like, kind of whimper and make this noise like it was hurting him, but he wasn't waking up. He goes, and so I grabbed a pillow and tossed it at this ghoul. He goes, and this thing's head just, like, turned real quick toward me, like, you know. He goes, and it just, like, looked real fast. And it was like this real weird, like, very, like, quick, very deliberate movement, like its head just kind of turned toward him. And he said he saw this yellow eyes with these black slits in the middle of them. And he said that this thing's nose was like, there was no nose. It was like the nose was cut off. And so it just began to just glide over to him. And the next thing you know, it's like grabbing his leg and trying to bite his leg. He goes, and when I went to scream, he said this thing moved its hand, lifted it up, and, like, I couldn't make any noise. And he goes, the whole time I was, like, with my mouth open, trying to talk, trying to scream, and nothing was coming out. There was no sound at all. He's like, and this pale, kind of yellowish looking, like decaying, rotting looking thing, like just began to like drink my blood right in front of me. I could not stop it. There was nothing I could do. And it was right out of my left calf. And he said I was sitting there just staring at it in horror. And then he goes, and then I began to feel drowsy, and I tried to fight it, but I couldn't stay awake, and I fell to sleep. He said the next day I have this like bruise on my leg, and there's this bite marks.
Okay, so aren't the similarities interesting? It's not exactly what I went through, obviously, but sort of in the same realm of creatures. She had the black shadow guy thing in her bed. I had the black shadow guy thing in my bed. And then the vampire things feeding on their legs, the vampire things feeding on my legs. And I hope the Biden pictures didn't detract from the seriousness of the issue. I just thought that's so funny. God's so funny that here I am working right on this segment of the video after, 60 hours of work on this video. I'm right on this segment of this video with these two clips, my story and the story from Paranormal Roundtable. I just couldn't resist. I had to put it in there. I thought it was too funny. Although this is not a funny subject. That's what I want to point out. I hope it didn't, detract from the seriousness of this issue. Because like the introduction all the way back at the entity, the beginning of this series, the whole point of this is the next level spiritual warfare. We are going into next level spiritual warfare. And the church isn't ready, you guys. I want to say that like, oh, some people aren't ready. No, like hardly anybody's ready. I threw up. I'm not kidding. I threw up when I saw the seriousness of the situation, the seriousness of what is coming upon the earth. When we have a church, organized religion, the mega churches, a lot of the regular churches though, who they don't even believe in the gifts of the Spirit. They're like, oh, well, that was something for just the apostles. And they completely do not even believe the Bible. All of the supernatural stuff in the Bible about demons and healings and multiplying food and walking on water. And they completely are like, oh, well, we're just not going to talk about that. We just want to dress up and go to our social club once a week and, sing 3 songs and listen to the message as if most of the messages are actually a message from the throne of God. I mean, God is out here. I'm out here delivering a message right now. Revelation is flowing, revelation that is needed to equip the saints for this era. We are in a spiritual war, and this thing is ramping up, and people in the lost don't know what's happening. The people who are being augmented into these lower frequency dimensions, they don't know what's happening. Their parents don't know what's happening, and the church is supposed to be the one with the message from God, the leader, but the church doesn't seem to even know what's happening. So I don't want to detract from the seriousness of the message, because next level spiritual warfare is not only coming, it is upon us. And it is time that we stop self-censoring about these events we have been through in our life, because this was our training. If you've been through hell and back, well, you've been trained. Congratulations. You graduated boot camp. And if you're still here to hear my voice, then you did graduate. And you know what's coming. You know that spiritual warfare is real, and it's okay to talk about it. We're done self-censoring because we have to equip the saints. The churches are not doing it. So the remnant body of Christ must speak up, tell the truth, and equip the saints for what is coming upon the earth. It's next level. And knowing the intensity of the battles that I have had to fight my way through just to be here alive to bring this message to you, to think that it's going to be next level from this, yeah, people aren't going to, it ain't going to be pretty if people don't get the full armor of God on. Seriously, these things will tear people to shreds if they don't know how to enter into spiritual warfare. Namely, and primarily, if they don't have Jesus Christ. They don't stand a chance. They literally do not stand a chance in hell without Jesus Christ and the covering of the Holy Spirit. It's just like the gal who just gave the testimony, the prophetic dream and vision about the embodiment of the Antichrist. That when they put the spirit in this genetically engineered body, that it destroyed everybody instantly, but she was protected because she was covered in the Holy Spirit. So it is our duty and our calling out of love to get this message out to the lost and to equip the saints who are in dead churches who aren't really getting a message from the throne. They're just getting a sermon. Okay, I just want to play the last few seconds of that Paranormal Roundtable story because it kind of segues me into a line of thought that I want to introduce.
And he said that it was just the most bizarre looking creature ever. And he said that it had this little cap on its head with like these like braids, you know, like these like ponytails on either side of its head, right? And he said that about 2 weeks after the initial attack, when it started happening regularly to him, and him and his brother both, he said, I'm pretty sure at this point, you know, that we were both anemic, you know, like this thing had been draining our blood.
Yeah.
He goes, and we were falling asleep and we couldn't stay awake and our parents were getting worried. And we kept telling our parents that there was this creature that was coming into our rooms.
Okay, so this brings us back, ties us all the way back into the hidden history of what was going on in the Dark Ages. Now, when I talk about the Dark Ages, I'm generally speaking about from about 500 AD to like the 1700s, right up about until the founding of the United States, which was also the same year as the founding of the Illuminati in Bavaria. Something seems to have gone on between about the 6th century up to about the 18th century. And one of the main hidden topics of that era is alchemy, the alchemists. They were working on sciences with ancient technology that have been completely censored from the historical record. And one of the greatest mysteries of those alchemists is the Philosopher's Stone, which was used for many things. But what I want to talk about here is immortality, the immortality projects that we see Silicon Valley is working on in our generation. But when we're talking about vampires and all of the legends of vampires, something was achieved. And it obviously did not turn out well, because all of the immortals, aside from like Count Saint Germain, most of the other immortals were monsters, they said. And at the very same time, we have these stories about the rabbi who created the Golem of Prague. And we discussed this story before, back in the nanoswarms and sentient mist videos, where we talked about these shadow people and how they were, well, the Golem, for one, the story of the Golem was that when he removed the thing from its head that held it together, it fell to the ground in particles, that it covered the attic in dust, that it wasn't, you know, how they make it out, oh, it's a big dumb hunk of clay, a golem. No, that's not the story of what was going on in Prague, which coincidentally would be located right here on my forest groves, my Groves of Witch Covens map. Actually, probably right about here where the eye on Bohemia is. So right up here in the Czech Republic. But, you know, you see the Bohemian forest and the Bavarian forest. So right here from this same region of these witch covens, we have these stories about experiments with immortality, which brings us back to the Philosopher's Stone even, because that's one of the lesser reported. You know, everybody thinks gold, gold, money, 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 but properties, here we go, and the creation of clones, and the creation of a clone or homunculus. But anyway, all in the same era, we have the witch trials. Then we have these stories of this Hasidic Jew creating this soulless golem creature out of particles. Then we have the stories of the Philosopher's Stone and these experiments with immortality and clones. Then we have all of the legends of these immortal, quote, vampires that have to drink blood for energy. And in our modern high technology, right, what do we see? That they say 6G inside the body, that our blood cells can power these nanoswarms. And all that leads me back to the satanic cult, the Sabbateans, during that same era, So it's probably just a coincidence that we have all of these stories of these underground, ancient mystery schools and alchemists creating basically immortal blood-drinking vampires. And then we have a simultaneous story, which now is blood libel. The ADL won't let you say anything about it, that there were rumors that there was a cult from within a branch of the Jewish religion that was doing blood rituals and drinking blood, and they don't know what they were using the blood for. There were a couple of reports we know about the Passover and the matzah bread and stuff, but from my research, that's kind of a cover-up. It just comes from about 4 articles, which were actually written by the Frankists. It's like if we were in the future reading MSNBC, you know what they say about us, that we're all terrorists and it's like that. It was the Frankists who were blaming everybody else. And I think this plays a large part of why so many of the records were scrubbed from that era, because it's so muddy now. Who can figure it out? Like, here's a 2007 book, and it says, to separate themselves from what they claimed to be normative Jewish practice, the Frankists were the good guys, and they said they did not accept the Talmud's authority. Centuries after the Frankists, quote, exposed Jews for ritually using Christian children's blood, this professor says there's a similar claim with a twist, and this is about the Ashkenazi Jews. So they were saying during the medieval period, it was actually the Ashkenazi Jews. So, the waters are pretty muddy. But I just wanted to point out that there absolutely was a satanic cult that had infiltrated Judaism and then split up and infiltrated Islam and even infiltrated the Catholic Church. And if you don't know anything about that, please go back into the last video and there's an entire segment on it. But this is what I was getting to with Paranormal Roundtable. You can see here on the screen the connection from the Jewish yarmulke, and then they still wear it. The whole Catholic hierarchy wears the Jewish yarmulke. So that's the part of the Paranormal Roundtable story that I found interesting. They said that this vampire, this Shadow Man vampire, wore the little hat with the ponytails on the side. And does that not sound exactly like the Hasidic Jews, like they were recording back in the Dark Ages?
And he said that it was just the most bizarre looking creature ever. And he said that it had this little cap on its head with like these like braids, like these like ponytails on either side of its head.
And it's not just the yarmulke ponytails on the side, shadow people. One of the most infamous and common shadow people, demonic intruders, is called Hat Man, who is always described as wearing a hat and a long coat. So is it a coincidence? Who always wears a hat and a long coat? I mean, there's just no denying that Hat Man always resembles the Hasidic Jews, the hat and the long coat. And there's lots of interesting stories around Hat Man that aren't just like, oh, a ghost came in and terrorized me. No, it's like almost like a secret spy sort of ghost. For example, there are lots of reports of Hat Man like going into people's storage units looking for something, going through things in people's houses, coming to watch or check on people in their houses who are, quote, targeted individuals. There was this one, and this guy had an ancient sort of witchcraft book, a mystery school type book from his grandpa. His grandpa had died, and it was in his grandpa's storage stuff. And this Hat Man was seen going into the storage stuff, looking through all of his papers and everything, trying to find this witchcraft book, this, mystery school ancient technology book. And the kid, I mean, he doesn't report it in the text of the Golem of Prague and the Hasidic Jew history with the alchemy and all of this that I'm talking about. He was just telling his story. Like, I saw this ghost, it was a Hat Man, and it was looking for this book. And then this mysterious guy came and visited my house afterwards. He seemed to know that I had taken the book out of the storage. He was saying stuff there's no way he could have known. So again, I have a whole section on Hat Man that I will do in the next video, but I just wanted to toss out this food for thought, foreshadow that, because I think this is what's going on. When you talk about the Israeli spy network, isn't it interesting that this sort of goes along with what Arizona Wilder was saying in the first video, The Entity, that she said her MK Ultra, her satanic ritual abuse, that they taught her how to disembody, that they would actually bring her to the brink of death so that she would have a near-death experience and be disembodied, and then they taught her to move objects beyond remote viewing. The first thing she was taught was remote viewing, but then they wanted her not just to disembody and be able to go and snoop around and spy on people, but to actually be able to move objects like a poltergeist, to be able to influence this world, this dimension, while disembodied. And she said she did that. She said they kept doing it to her until she was able to pick up the pencil and stuff as, you know, what we would perceive as a ghost. So just think about that. If our CIA and MK Ultra projects were working on this sort of disembodied remote viewing and that type of thing, why would it be so weird to think that the Israeli intelligence agencies would also have engaged in similar studies? And like I've said before, I think the paranormal community, or parts of the paranormal community, are misinterpreting people who get these encounters all the time as, quote, experiencers, as if they have some sort of spiritual gift that they can see or something like that, when I believe that people who get these experiences all the time are targeted individuals. And all of these entities work for a singular agenda, which I have more testimonies about that coming up. But for me personally, I can tell you it has not been a gift. It has not been a gift that I have had to battle and encounter these types of things throughout my life. And for people who say silly things like, oh, people would just make that up for attention and stuff. Nobody wants this kind of attention because you're so isolated. There's nobody you can tell about it. Your own family will look at you like you're crazy. Literally, your own family will. And I haven't even shared 1/100th of the paranormal experiences I've had in my life on this channel. I haven't even told my cryptid stories or my bluff charge story or what happened after the orb that I saw in the backyard, the rest of that. I mean, it's endless. And Hat Man is one of those stories, and that's scary. I did not see him. My son saw him, and my son was only about probably 6 years old, maybe 7 years old, and he came and told me, Mom, there was a black man in the kitchen. And I'm like, there was a black man in the kitchen? And he's like, a shadow, not a person, a shadow. And I'm like, oh, a shadow man. Well, what did he look like? And, you know, he told me, described him to me, and he was a hat man. He said he was a shadow man. He had a hat on with a big brim, and he had a long coat on, and he was like a person, but he was just a shadow. And he said he saw him walk through our kitchen and out into the garage. So that was it. But that's scary because my son wouldn't lie about that. He had never seen or heard anything about a hat man or anything like that. I mean, he was at 6 or 7 years old. He was just like watching Paw Patrol or Peppa Pig or something. He had never heard anything about this. And he exactly described a hat man. And that's no small deal to me because, like I said, I have had actual injuries that put me in the hospital after encounters with these things. It really is a battle. And I don't know why God allows that sometimes. I think maybe it is for our training because we won't believe it. If we were completely protected and never experienced these things, just like he gives so many people visions of hell, that if we didn't know, then we wouldn't know. And that's something that Tucker Carlson was talking about in his demonic encounter, that it sucks that he went through it, but it was actually that made him believe in the spiritual realities. So going along with my message that this thing is going to the next level, I think it's timely that both Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones both come out with their demon encounters, their spiritual warfare encounters right now, this week.
Do you think the presence of evil is kickstarting people to wonder about the good?
That's what happened to me.
That's what happened to you?
Oh, yeah. I had a direct experience with it.
In the milieu of journalism or just?
Nope, in my bed at night, and I got attacked while I was asleep with my wife and 4 dogs in the bed and mauled. Physically mauled.
In a spiritual attack by a demon?
Yeah, by a demon. Or by something unseen that left.
Is that right?
Claw marks on my sides, on my...
So it left physical marks?
Oh, they're still there. Yeah. A year and a half ago.
Was your wife terrified? I know you were.
I wasn't. I was totally confused. I woke up and I couldn't breathe and I thought I was gonna suffocate, and I walked around outside, and then I walked in and my wife and dogs had not woken up, and they're very light sleepers. And then I had these terrible pains on my rib cage and on my shoulder, and I was just in my boxer shorts, and I went and flipped on the light in the bathroom, and I had 4 claw marks on either side underneath my arms and on my left shoulder, and they're bleeding.
Wait, they were bleeding?
They're bleeding, yeah. No, they're actual claw marks. And I sleep on my side, so I wasn't clawing myself. I don't have long nails. And they didn't fit my hands anyway. But yeah, that happened. So I'm not from a world where things like that happen. I never heard of anything like that happening before. I had no idea what that was. I knew it was spiritual immediately.
You did? Okay, that was gonna be my question.
Yeah. I don't understand to this day. I'm not gonna put it
You didn't try to refute the spiritual part in your own mind. You went right into the
Well, it didn't make any sense, and it doesn't now. But I'm not from a, what do they call it, faith tradition that talks about things like that or even acknowledges their existence. Like, there's nothing like that. I've never heard anybody say anything like that in my whole life.
What was the next day like?
Well, the next morning I woke up and I thought, that was the weirdest dream I've ever had. And then I saw blood on my sheets and I realized that was not a dream at all. I called my assistant, who was like the only evangelical Christian I know, well enough to call with something bizarre like that, totally bizarre like that. And she said, oh yeah, no, that happens. Yeah, people are attacked in their bed by demons. What? What are you even talking about? Yeah. So, I'm not leaving anything out, and I'm not pretending to understand that. I can only say what happened to me, and that did happen to me, and then I was seized with this very intense desire to read the Bible, which I then started without any study aids or anything. I bought a Bible that didn't have any. I'm not interested in editorializing in the Bible. I just want to read it and see what's in there myself. I have very low levels of trust for Christian pastors, most of whom, I'm just not a fan at all. And sorry to say that, but that's how I feel. And so I don't want to hear other people's opinions. I just want to see what's in there. And so I spent a year and a half reading it, and then I started rereading it. And it was just a transformative experience for me, but I'm not, holding myself out as someone from whom you could get theological advice, because I'm not.
Of course.
I don't know. I don't understand any of it. But yeah, that happened.
God
to me.
allowed the demon?
I have no idea what happened. All I know is I was dead asleep with my wife and dogs, and I woke up with claw marks on my rib cage underneath my arms. And it didn't even make sense. My arms would, anyway, whatever. No one has to believe me. I don't care.
It doesn't matter.
But that happened to me. And so I just was like, wow, that's real. Whatever that is, I'm even not sure what it is.
It's very real. And so then that presence of that evil launches something.
All right. I have never told this story or these stories, and I'm going to do it tomorrow on the Friday show. But I was basically inspired to go ahead and do it by Tucker Carlson today. So, a few years ago, I knew about this when it first happened, and I'm not going to get into the details and sources of that. But then last year, when I was at Tucker's house in Maine at dinner, we started talking about the paranormal and things. And he told me about the 2 experiences he'd had in his life. Once when he was a child at their house out in California in the backyard. And then the other had happened about a year before, or a little less than a year before, and he was a guy who wasn't sure God was real. He's not like some guy that hears voices and sees stuff. He's not schizophrenic. And he got attacked, and he told the story about the demon in the bed, scratching him and all the rest of it. that's one of the common things in lore and history and all cultures. Talk about that from the Japanese to the ancient Romans. It's something that happens to the ancient Africans. Those stories get told, and they're there for a reason. They're universal because they happen. And I've never really told my stories. I told him some, and he wanted me taping his podcast the next day to tell him. And I said, the public can't handle it. I said, why don't you tell him your story? He goes, you're right. I get your point. So I guess now was the time for him to tell it. In fact, I got the feeling he was going to tell the story on air if I told my story. It's more than one story. It's one poltergeist. That's what it was. I mean, poltergeist. There's no doubt about it. I'll tell the story tomorrow. It was like real obvious. And for Tucker, that's why you've seen the last 2 years him really go super hardcore and really wake up, was because he experienced this, a demon attacking. Well, I'll just tell you my personal story. Every few weeks I'd go see a movie with my dad, usually, sometimes with my mom and dad, but she didn't want to watch adventure movies and military movies. And so Rambo 3 was out. I was 11 years old. It's one where he's in Afghanistan or whatever. And I'll never forget it because this has just happened. We went to see it. And my dad's in the car. And I said, Dad, so we're getting in the car to leave the house to drive to the movie theater. And I said, Dad, I'm thirsty. I want to drink. He goes, okay. So I get out of the car. It's like 1 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever. It was the afternoon, sunny summer day. And because I remember I've been at the local neighborhood pool swimming a bunch before that. Came home, took a shower. And I never heard voices, never seen a ghost. It's not like I'm a schizophrenic. Totally not on drugs, totally healthy, sports kid. And I walk to the front door and then walk by the living room and the stairs to the upstairs. And I go into the kitchen to get a Gatorade. I still remember like it was happening now. And there's no water on the floor. I didn't slip any of that. And I go to get the Gatorade. And then I get snatched and thrown all the way to the ceiling. And then I crash down. And I'm like, what's this? And it's like, oh, what's that movie with Ghost or whatever, where like trying to get people's attention and knocking stuff over or knocking them down or whatever. So I stand back up and I'm like, what the hell's that? And then bam, my legs are knocked out from under me. And I get shoved up against the wall in the microwave. And I get up and I go out to the car and get in the car with my dad, get in the Bronco with him, brown Bronco, still remember it like it was yesterday. And he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, my shoulder hurts. So we get to the theater, get the Milk Duds and popcorn. And about halfway through, I say, Dad, I'm in excruciating pain now. My shoulders hurt. And he owned, with a couple partners, a hospital. It wasn't a clinic because they did surgeries there, but it was a little hospital there in Rowlett. That was Mesquite. He owned a couple of them. And he goes, well, let's go over here. Dr. Whatever's there. And we go, and my shoulder's dislocated. And the doctor gets in there and asks me and my dad for permission to try it. And he shoves hurt like hell, but boy, it felt 95% better after that. Shoves my right shoulder back into socket. And I go home. And I never even told my dad that story. I never told anybody. I think I halfway mentioned it like, oh, I know poltergeist stuff's real or whatever you want to call it. Disruptive spirit, whatever. They smash things, break things, throw people around, call it whatever you want. That happened to me. And I mean, was it an alien with a predator suit on that was invisible? I don't know. But something, I mean, it was surreal. Like you're thrown to the ceiling, and that kitchen didn't have really high ceilings, but boom, probably 9-foot ceiling, something, boom, slam down on your back, get up, bam, knocks you back down again, and then shoves you up against a wall. Like you see that in movies where the ghost of the demon grabs people and slams them on walls and slams them up against stuff. And what is that? And Tucker described more to me than he, did in the show, but just a darkness coming at him. And That's recorded in all the history books, all the ancient cultures, same crap. The Japanese reported it. The Norse reported it. The Chinese, the Africans, the Mesoamericans, every culture describes the same thing. So you can say whatever you want about it, whatever it is, whatever's going on. But I think it's really important to talk about that if it happened, and it did. And if you study that in all cultures, they say the most common thing, in fact, 90+% of it, if you look up a poltergeist, and that's kind of the German term for it, Christians like myself say, well, that's a demon. But the point is, a debate broke out on my ex. Is it a demon? Is it a poltergeist? It's not nice.
Okay, as scary as all that is, that all of this really is going on in this dimension, it gets worse. The dimensions are layered. They are facets of one thing. So what we are doing in this dimension also affects what is going on in the next dimension. And what is going on in the next dimension also affects what is going on in this dimension. These aren't separate worlds, and these aren't separate battles. They are overlapped dimensions of one larger world, and they are overlapped battles of one larger war. So let's just start with the first level of the soul trap. Many of you already know this, but some people don't. So the crux of it is that the simulation is more than one layer deep. People think, oh, just on this plane of existence, that's all it is. The matrix is just here, but then you die and you're out of it. That is not true. It is several dimensions deep, several layers deep. When you die and leave your body, when you're disembodied, the AI is going to be waiting for you with a virtual reality illusion. Now, obviously, there's another path for the saved. There are those who have already opted out of the matrix, but I'm talking about the billions upon billions upon billions of people who are stuck in the time loop. And they don't know. They reject Christ. They've been told that that's ludicrous and that's mythology, and even that God is this horrible murderer. And, they've been told everything by the Antichrist, this AI system, to keep them from seeking salvation. So the vast majority of people in this plane of existence will go into the next dimension when disembodied, and they will encounter the virtual reality soul trap, the diabolical mimic that will lead people into a virtual reality prison, a hell, a recycling center that they can never get out of. So let's start with a clip from David Icke. I also just read his book this year, The Dream, which is about this virtual reality and how the lens, instead of being put over our eyes like VR glasses, has been put into our brains. And although David is not yet saved, and I didn't agree with all of the book, I did agree with about 80%. He was about 80% of excellent, excellent information that we all need. He only lacked, in my humble opinion, in the part that he didn't realize that this revelation was given to him to show him what dire circumstances he's in, that he needs salvation. So I would ask everyone to please continue to pray for David, that he comes to the full realization of the revelation that he needs salvation through Jesus Christ, quote, the way and the truth that he has been looking for his entire life on this journey. But all that being said, what he is presenting here about the reincarnation trap is absolutely true and plays into the big picture I'm trying to present. So I'm going to play his short clip first before we move into the deeper, more profound revelations on this topic.
What is real? How do you define real? If you're talking about what you can feel, what you can smell, taste, and see, then real is simply electrical signals interpreted by your brain. What if all you ever knew was a lie?
You've said this, and I have to ask you because our viewers would be very disappointed if I didn't. In our previous conversation, you talked about the light, right? You talked about this, and I think part of why this is such a designed experience is also that today people are pushed into situations where they die with stress and trauma rather than in a natural, or let's say in how it previously was in a more conscious way when they leave this physical experience. What happens, to the best of your research and knowledge and experience, when you leave the physical body, and there's usually this experience of a bright light, and in the Native American traditions, we're told not to walk into this light, right? They say, turn around, wait. What is happening there, and how do people, because people literally asked, how do we avoid this trap? What do we do?
They talk about going to the light. They talk about merging with the light. The light, the light, the light. In the, reincarnation religions, they're preparing you for the reincarnation cycle while you're here to keep going. So what is light? Well, light, I've made this point in a number of books. Well, I said that just after the turn of millennium, that this was a simulation, and the limit of the simulation is the speed of light. And in April of 2021, there was an article in Scientific American by some academic who had concluded that this is a simulation and that the limit of the simulation is the speed of light. And he related, I say rightly, the speed of light to the processing speed of this level. Well, he didn't think this, that he thought this was the simulation. There were other levels of it, but the speed of light, the processing speed of what I would say is this level of the simulation. As he pointed out, you can encode the laws of physics, but you're still limited by your processing speed. And so it would appear that the speed of light is the fastest speed possible. But actually, that's only here. You take astral and non-physical phenomena, like communication between, electrons and all that stuff, then it's not the speed of light that they communicate with. It's bloody instant, way beyond the speed of light, because it's in a different dimension that's going on, a different reality. And so the spiritual symbol in this world is light, the light. But if you look at the Gnostic documents found at Nagamadi in 1945, a treasure trove, really, supposed to have been put in an earthen jar, which was found in 1945 in around 400 AD, that kind of time. But detailing information, that beliefs that went further back, they don't talk about electromagnetic light, like that light. They talk about a watery light. It's a very different light. And that's what they say is beyond what they call the bad copy, the simulation that we're experiencing. So this whole light thing is a trap as well. So when you are manipulated and prepared beforehand to see light as something positive, and then suddenly you leave the body and you're completely bloody confused what's happening, then what happens is the light appears, and it's soothing light. It's very much nicer than the shite I've just left. Oh, this must be heaven. And then you have your spiritual masters and your guides and your loved ones and such like, which as I've concluded that they are AI projections. They're AI projections that relate to you individually. And when people say that's not possible, that's fantastic. Well, hold on a minute. There's 1.5 billion people in China, and the great majority of them are tracked 24/7. So if they can do it in China, they can certainly do it in the bloody astral with an AI technological possibility that's way, way beyond anything that humans can currently conceive. And when people talk about, Edgar Casey talks about the Akashic records, when you see how these Akashic records, where they say that everything is recorded, everything is kept, it's like an infinite library of everything that's ever happened in this reality.
Sounds like a cloud.
Yeah, they're talking about a database. And when I read, like in Edgar Casey sites and stuff, how they describe the Akashic records, they're even using computer analogies. They're saying, well, it's like a supercomputer. Well, you know what? It is, but way beyond anything we can perceive here. It's recording everything. So you are connected to that as an individual, quote, incarnation. And so when you leave the body and the trap has to continue to get you back here to loose you more, then you get a designer manipulation.
So a couple of great points that David made were, one, the Akashic records. Absolutely, 100%. What the New Age religions are talking about, these Akashic records, they're the AI. And that's why in the first part of this series, The Entity, I brought up Atlantis and did that segment with all of the sunken civilizations from the antediluvian world, that there were massive, massive high-tech civilizations. And it's interesting, if you read the Slavic Vedas, which just happened to be from that region of the Eastern Tartarian Empire, in the Slavic Vedas, it talks about this ancient AI and how the parasitic demons basically put us into this dark age, and they used these crystal skulls, right? They used crystals to create both a grid above us and a grid underground. So like HARP on steroids. I mean, essentially they're saying that the remnants of this ancient AI matrix system some of it is still in place and running in the underworld with these underworld creatures. And that's what we are calling the Schumann resonance, right? Because we were just born into this. And now it's starting to go crazy and people are tracking it and it's changed and all of that. You know, something's shorting out or something is changing. Well, they say that that's part of this ancient AI system, that there's an underground grid and an overhead grid that these parasitic demons used to put us into a dark age that is coming to an end right now. And since this part of the series is already running at about 7 hours, 7 episodes, I'm not going to be able to get to it this time, but I will put it in the next one. But I have some interesting information about this grid, this ancient AI grid from these high-tech civilizations like Atlantis that were wiped out, how that control network was just one part of a really high-tech infrastructure that ties into the ley lines and the megaliths and into these cathedrals with this Tesla technology and the cathodes and the spires and all of that. And exactly how they've lied to us about what HARP is actually used for, and they've lied to us about what the Schumann resonance actually is. They have lied to us about what the Carrington event of 1859 was. That this electrical shock went through the whole earth. People standing on the ground were shocked like they touched an electrical fence. There were other people who said their foreheads sparked. These are true encounters from that era that nobody really understands. But, you know, the pineal gland, the mark in your forehead, they said their pineal gland or their foreheads sparked, different things like that. So I believe the Carrington event, what really happened wasn't a solar storm. I believe that they fired up the grid. This was the time that the mud flood community are talking about, that they came back upon the earth and they were digging out all of the buildings. And this was the exact era that all of those big fires happened, right? And they say, oh, well, it was burned down with a fire. And I have no doubt they were destroying evidence and stuff. Absolutely no doubt. That's gone on throughout all of world history. But I think some of those buildings that all burnt down at this same time in 1859, 1860, 1861, 1862, I believe these major buildings, they were trying to fire up this technology. I believe that they were trying to get their grid back up and running. And obviously there wasn't enough salvageable, but I believe that accounts for some of the fires. I believe it accounts for this Carrington event that went all through the ley lines everywhere. So anyway, I'm rambling, but I have an interesting segment on that I'd like to present some information about next video. But back to what David was saying about the Akashic records being part of this ancient AI, I absolutely believe that. And I think these altered states of consciousness, these different brain waves that people like Edgar Cayce, the quote sleeping prophet, were experiencing are similar to what these realm walkers that I'm going to be presenting here, or the autistic children, or, there's lots of different ways to get into these states of consciousness or realms. And I believe that the quote sleeping prophet, that's what he was accessing. I think David's right on. And I also think that's exactly what we were talking about in the Shaver Mysteries and the Darrow part of that Welcome to Westworld series. That's what the Shaver Mysteries say. And the guy in the radio interviews that I played from the 50s and everything in there, that's what they say. That these entities had leftover technology, high technology from ancient times that they were able to fire back up. And these detrimental robots were actual AI. They were artificial synthetic entities that were linked into this AI. They were robots. There was also an interesting article I read about the infinite backrooms, the Claude Opus 3 experiments where they put two AI talking about the nature of reality together in a chat room with no human intervention. And one of the first things that the AI wanted to do was go directly and access the Akashic records. So I think there's something about linking the new AI, this iteration, surface level that they are creating. Like, that's not the end of it. They are creating something to link in to the ancient AI. Like, they're fixing the grid. They're not creating something new. They're trying to get the old grid up and running, in my humble opinion. And the last thing that I think he was really right on about in that work, which ties into another thing he said that you guys know we've been tracking with for a long time too, and that was about the Nag Hammadi and the Gnostic Gospels, the Gnostic religions, talking about the archons and the demiurge and the bad copy. And that's, I believe that's exactly what we're dealing with. Like right now here on the screen, we see it again. AI-generated Minecraft unveiled, showcasing AI's unlimited ability to copy things, but worse. And we've shown article after article about that AI that trains itself and things start to go really weird. And then, of course, I always reference Dante's Inferno, the layers of hell, how every copy, it's a bad copy of a bad copy of a bad copy, and it's in a state of entropy. It just gets worse and worse and worse, and it distills into the Inferno. It destroys itself. Which leads me right back to the next clip about this AI deception, that in this simulation, the next layer of the simulation, people are going over into the next dimension of it, thinking they're going into heaven, and it's just an AI tailor-made virtual reality manipulation that it is a torment of hell.
And I was being moved toward this door, and I went through that door into a void. I mean, a tornado vortex. It was just going round and round. It was a tunnel, spinning. All these people ran out, and they come around me, slapping me on the back. They got there awful quick because the house looked far away, but all of a sudden they were there, slapping me on the back, welcoming me there. But something just wasn't quite right with them because they looked weird. They had yellow glints in their eye, and their eyes were almost reptile-like. I looked over and I saw what looked like my best friend turn into somebody else. And I said, hey, wait a minute, you can't do that. You're not who you say you are. Who are you? And then all of a sudden I looked around and I go, all these people around me are not people. I began to morph into what they were. They were ugliest creatures I've ever seen. and they were just starting to come at me like they're gonna shred me to pieces. And this one that looked like my best friend earlier, who morphed into different people, came up to me. It was a little, it was about 4'8", looked like a sort of half dinosaur, a reptilian type creature, and I was telling, and it was broken in English. It was telling me to come, follow it, follow it, follow it. So he motioned to me, and we took a few steps, and all of a sudden we were at the end of the horizon. That doesn't make any sense, but we came across to what looked like the end of the horizon. He couldn't go any further, and I couldn't understand what it was. That creature stuck its hand in this horizon, and he ripped it open like a veil, and he stepped out of it up onto this road, and he telling me to come, motioning me to come, so I did the same. I just went ahead, I got out, and next thing I knew, I was on a large, wide, dusty, flat road. I just came out of a cell, a cube. It was around 10 by 10 foot square. It could have been 14 by 14. And there was a cell next to it, and there was a cells above it, kind of set back, concave, so they're going up. And there were 6 of them to the roof of of this place. And in the walls are embedded peoples in cells. And he pointed to another cube, and in this cube, I was looking at there were people inside these cubes. This person in there. And I was just looking at them, and then it was showing me another person. Each person that was in their cube was like they were reliving parts of their life all over again, but and not in a very pleasant way. It's like a living nightmare. And as we were walking along, I realized that hell is just an enormous big place, and there's many other parts to hell that I did not see. I just saw this place called the pit. To the middle of the road, so we walked out in the middle of the road, and all these demons and creatures running around, and I saw all these people in various stages of torment. And some of these demon creatures inside these cubes were going in at will, and they would be attacking people in various ways. But to the people, they look like other people, or times in their lives, or they look like demons. Whatever their worst nightmare was basically what they were living. We walked along to another cube, looked inside of another individual that was there, and it reminded me of an old sailing ship. And this guy used to be a captain of the ship, and he was being flogged. Things that he did on this old sailing ship, he did it for pleasure for these people because it was his ship, and he liked to be mean to his crew, and it was being meted back to him. I noticed this being, this creature looking at me, and with its faces revolving around, very seductive, very, very flattering, very, very persuasive. It would try to plant thoughts in your mind, trying to tell you, why would such a good God allow people to suffer like this? It was trying to get me to curse God. This one vortex was spinning, and a lady that had just died in a car wreck came through, and she was deposited right there. And I saw her as she arrived, and inside her cube, she saw it as the illusion of her grandmother's farm, her grandparents' farm that she loved so well as when she was growing up. And her grandmother recently passed away too, so she got in this cube, and immediately she thought she was in heaven because there was a grandmother waiting there welcoming me. The grandmother that was actually a demon that gave the illusion of being the grandmother said, "Dear Pudding, you made it to heaven. I'm so glad you're here." And she really thought that she was in paradise. But there was a darker side to her. It was the fist. It was verbal abuse. It was cutting down. So as she sat down, I was watching it, and the tree's limbs just grabbed her. And then she realized she was not in paradise. And as we passed some cubes, there were people inside, and they were trapped in flames. And it was like their skin was still intact, but they were burning.
Okay, that was a quick review of the Brian Melvin testimony that we have played in previous videos. This one on the screen is an interview from Deep Believer. She has an awesome channel. She has some really great interviews. But I pulled this one in particular because he saw the same exact thing that Brian Melvin saw. And all of these other interviews, all these people, they've never even heard of each other. I believe his name is Cody, and he died of a drug overdose. He was dead for 4 hours, and he said he spent several days in this hell place. And I hope I'm not messing up the details, and I hope I got his name right. If I didn't, I'm very sorry. But I'll play the clip here so you can see for yourself, and then, as always, I will put all of the links down below in the description box. A couple of the interesting takeaways from this one is, one, he saw the light that David Icke was talking about, the fake light, that it was an initial deception. And I want to be clear that that doesn't mean every person that ever saw a light or ever saw loved ones or anything like that in a near-death experience, that it was the simulation. That's not at all what we're saying. We're saying that this thing is a mimic. It's a mimic. It mimics what it saw to create these deceptions and virtual realities and stuff. So absolutely 100% not saying that every near-death experience is fake. That is not what we are saying. And in fact, you'll notice that in every single one of these testimonies, the Christians say they could clearly tell the difference. They knew this was fake. The other thing that's interesting about what he says is that he saw Joseph Smith in one of these simulations being tortured over and over. And I thought that might be interesting because we were just talking about the Mormons being one of the people who are doing the DNA harvesting from humanity, tracking bloodlines or whatever. And that'll play into an extension of this concept that we're going to talk about here pretty soon. How these entities are not just cloning for avatars, but they are cloning for this diabolical, unbelievably diabolical soul trap. So make of it what you will. I'm not saying nothing. I just wanted to say that because I'm not sure that he's clear until the very end of the testimony that that's who he saw, because he didn't know who it was when he was shown that. He had no idea who Joseph Smith was until he came back.
Well, you know what? Let's go back to that jail cell. So it was a bright light, which is, you know, weird because it's hell. But then after that, was it dark?
I saw a bright light. It was staged. To me, this is what it makes me think of. It was a first impression that's going to trick me into thinking I'm going to see some beautiful stuff in here.
Okay.
I think it was kind of like what it would be if you wanted to, like on a Hollywood movie, when it goes real bright and then they step in and everything's gold coins or whatever, right? It just kind of was like a Hollywood effect or something. But when it did trick me into thinking that I was going to see something nice. It was a nice outside of it. But when we went in there, everybody's in jail cells and they're all in those trance things. And they're all the people who they led many people to hell because of their false doctrine of demons. They were fooled and they fooled many others, you know?
Wow. Now you said something really interesting. You said all their jail cells were open, but nobody was leaving. What in the world? Why?
I don't know why that's there. Maybe somebody watching this might get some insight on that.
Now, I actually do have some more information on that. I have an interview with Dr. Laura Sanger where she is talking about the artificial intelligence and this frequency war on our children, especially pertaining to what we've been talking about with the autistic children who have been genetically augmented and linked in to this bio and tech AI interface. And when she was called by the Lord to write a book about this information, one of the visions that he gave her was also these jail cells, and he was giving her a key to open them and unplug these children. But some of the jail cells she opened, even though they were open, the children would not come out. And she wondered about that too. So I'm just going to pop in that minute or two clip right here to juxtapose it against what he saw. And I'll be playing several more clips of her interview later on in this series. But yeah, right now I just thought that was interesting. So I'm going to pop it in here.
Well, prior to that, in May of 2020, I had this dream, and it was before I knew who was going to publish my book. And so in this dream, I had a publisher say that if I write a book about how AI has stolen the vocal cords of our children, they will publish it. Then about 5 months later, I had a vision while I was awake. And in this vision, Jesus took me by the hand and we walked down this dirt path into this underground cave, and it was at the base of a mountain. And so he walked me into this large, dark cavern, and then he released his breath, and it came out like this blue light. And it allowed me to see what was in this cavern. And I saw children in cages lining the entire wall of this cavern, and they were plugged into the walls. And so then Jesus told me to take the key of David and to begin unlocking these cages and unplugging them from the walls. And so when I did that, they ran into the arms of Jesus. But there were some children that stayed in the cages, even though I unlocked the cage and even though I unplugged them. And this was long before I understood satanic ritual abuse. And the Lord helped me understand that they had been programmed to stay. So he told me to take my sword of the Spirit and just begin demolishing the cage. Well, as I'm having this vision, the Holy Spirit is giving me revelation. Because again, this is in 2020 when I'm having this vision. And the Holy Spirit is showing me that, through the lockdowns, through the school closures, it forced children to turn to their devices for social interaction, for entertainment, and also for schooling. That allowed Nephilim hosts to gather AI data on our children to hoodwink them. And so it was at that point that the Lord began showing me that we have an entire generation, not just our children, but adults as well, that have been hoodwinked, and it's time to set them free.
You wouldn't need, if you want them to stay in there, you don't need to close it because they're not really using their real body. They are in a video. It's just like the Matrix. Like he comes, all of a sudden he realizes he's in a pod the whole time. His real body is in some jail, right? But this whole time he's been living this life. It's exactly like that, I guess. They're not there. You can't talk to them. They're kind of like looking like they're dreaming or something, right? You know what I mean?
You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension. A dimension of sound. A dimension of sight. A dimension of mind. You're moving into a land of both shadow and substance, of things and ideas. You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.